Following a previous video of mine on the best Bionicle Showdowns, I've decided to revisit some more which I think are worthy of mention. The same criteria as before applies. These are either epic in scope, develop a particular character, or has a significant impact on the wider story. Now for this first one I'm going to indulge myself a little bit as it's not particularly pivotal to the story, rather it's just bloody awesome and leans heavily into the epic criterion. This is a showdown mentioned in a previous video of mine about the Zone of Darkness, though I think it deserves looking at in a bit more detail here. It is the fight that uses principally between the Tartorak and the Zevon, though Kraka is somewhat involved as well. I think this is the closest we got to a kaiju style battle in the Bionicle storyline, and yes, even though we got the Tartorak versus the Knowi Dragon and Cardass later on, they both feel a little underwhelming compared to this, probably because they weren't novelised. The details of this fight are given to us in the Bionicle Adventures 8 Challenge of the Hordika, as the Toa Hordika and the Rahaga confront Sidorak and his Visorak. Bound with webbing, Wenua and Bamonga could only watch as the Kargarak opened another gateway into the field of darkness. Visorak backed away, scurrying for cover. Wenua wished he could join them as the Zevon began to emerge. It was gigantic. A horror so great that Toa Hordika had to make an effort to keep his sanity. Even in his days as an archivist, he had never seen such a thing. Towering over the buildings, it looked like some obscene hybrid of a Visorak or an Usul crab, and who knew what else. Its head was pure spider, but the twin claws that snapped buildings in two like dry twigs belonged to a sea creature. It moved about on 6 legs, its scorpion-like tail lashing out to level anything that caught its eye. And what do we get to face such a creature? Nothing less than a Tartorak, a mighty Rahi from a distant land that had to be defeated and put away not once but twice by the Toa Metru. It is convinced by Kraka to team up with the Toa and the Rahaga against the Visorak, which she claimed held the answer it so desperately wanted. What I like about this moment is that the Rahaga, the Toa Hordika and Kraka had all been wronged by Rudaka or the Visorak at some point, so were for a brief time united in their desire to strike back in revenge. At the Tower of Toa, the fury of the Tartorak is unleashed onto the ancient horror of the Zevon, stepped from a world where light has no meaning. Kraka was the first to spot the Zevon moving towards the Toa Hordika of fire. Used to living in darkness, the smoke and dust could not obscure the Zevon's vision. Kraka swooped down and dug her talons into the Tartorak's flesh to spur it on towards the Visorak's monstrous ally. Vakama saw the danger too late. Zevon's claws slashed towards him, only to be knocked aside by a sweeping blow from the Tartorak's tail. Vakama leaped from the roof even as the Zevon charged, slamming into the Tartorak's midsection and driving the beast back. The unstoppable force that is the Tartorak finally meets its match, and the pair continue to tear pieces out of each other while everyone else could only stay out of the way unless they get battered away by either of the creature's limbs. After throwing each other around for a bit, and the Zevon trying to entrap the Tartorak in its webbing, the clash of giants was brought to an end by a Kargarak, who ended up banishing both creatures into the Zone of Darkness, along with Kraka, who had been stuck between the two behemoths for the majority of the fight. This to me is probably the closest Godzilla vs Kong moment we get in the storyline, and it's certainly the most developed, with it being fully novelised and given the detail we all would want to see in a matchup such as this. Staying in 2005 for the next one, as well as a fight we get detailed in a novel, is the fight between Kraka and Rudaka. Not only is this quite an epic clash, it tells us quite a lot about the two characters. The fight occurs at the start of the same book as the Zevon fight, and sources such as Biosector state that the Kraka lost this fight, which, while technically true, I think deserves at least an asterisk after that. When I reread Challenge of the Hordika a few months ago, I was actually taken aback by how close run this fight is, something that isn't really reflected on sites such as Biosector. In fact, I would say that this is probably the most formidable foe Rudaka has ever fought. Every time you think of one of the combatants has got it, the fight is over, the other pulls something out of the bag and turns the tide again. Kraka's constant and clever use of shape-shifting to adapt to the situation at hand also makes this an exciting and even matchup. The other element to this that should also be considered is that Rudaka has to face Kraka one-on-one, not only because of her pride, but also her image and reputation before the Visorak. If she retreated from this threat and let her minions do it, she'd lose her carefully cultivated image in front of the Visorak, whom she ruled in part so effectively by showing no fear, as well as a desire to avoid any course of action which Sidorak would have taken. The creatures that Kraka transforms into during this battle with Rudaka are a Troller, a Lava Eel, a Kargarak, and a small burrowing creature by its description, along with Kraka's familiarity with and making her home in the archives, I see as likely being an Archives mole. While we are told on a couple of occasions here by the narrator and Rudaka herself that she could have ended the fight immediately had she had so wished, I read this a little akin to the Pterodax syndrome, whereby an arrogant character says they could defeat an enemy quickly, but then continue to struggle against said enemy. It happened with Pterodax and Brutaka in the pit, and it happened here with Rudaka and Kraka, and I'm always going to root for the latter over the former in both instances. Kraka circled warily. The shape-shifting Rahi had faced many foes in her life, including the Tometru, but this Rudaka was different. Every move she made was carefully calculated, and all part of a grand strategy. There was no wasted motion, no scrambling to react to Kraka's changes of shape. Next, moving on to 2006, is the battle for the Kanoe Ignaika between the Taurinaika and Vizon. The first proper showdown for the Mask of Life culminates with lava and mutated beasts. What's not to like? Not only does Vizon, whose allegiance to only himself put the tower through serious difficulties, but provides himself with endless entertainment with the Spear of Fusion and the hapless Paraka. "All done?" asked Vizon. "My turn." Fenrak charged at impossible speed. Vizon caught Jala with the flat of his spear and hurled the tower of fire across the chamber. Luparu rocketed into the air to catch his leader before Jala was smashed against a rock. Down below, Yuki tried to come at Fenrak from behind, only to be flattened by a blow from one of the spider's legs. The battle became a nightmarish blur. Vizon and Fenrak were everywhere at once, battering the tower into the ground. The more the tower fought back, the harder they were struck down. Just when we thought the battle couldn't get any more intense, the powers of the Ignaika transformed the already monstrous Fenrak into the dragon Kardas, rising from the lava in which it was born. Unfortunately for Vizon, things don't go particularly well for him after that. He loses the Mask of Life and the powers it gave him, and the Spear of Fusion gets broken by Radak, before he is lost to the vicious Zyglak while attempting to chase the tower through the cord.